Hi, and thanks for checking out October's edition of Northern BC News for real estate investors. The government this month has just announced the unemployment figures for the region. They've come in at under 4%. Just so you know, 4% is considered zero unemployment in a region. So the area is already going at max capacity and it actually has a surplus of jobs. That's wonderful for us because people will need to move in to fill those jobs, and of course, those will be your renters. Also, some fantastic news this month from a company called Canada. This is a new startup out of Calgary who's going to be investing $500 million just north of Fort St. John to build a gas processing plant. This is great news for a couple of reasons. Number one, of course, the obvious is it creates a lot of jobs. But number two, what I also really like to see is it shows a lot of confidence in the natural gas sector right now. So to see new money coming into the region, I think is fantastic news. Also this month, Canfor has announced that they will be building 2 new wood pellet plants in Fort St. John and Chetwynd. They'll be spending $58 million and they expect to have these plants up and running by late 2015. One thing that you might not know about Northeast BC is that the forestry sector is going very strong. A big part of this is that they don't have the pine beetle problems that communities further south have. The reason for that is that it still gets cold enough in the winter to kill off all of the pine beetle. I grew up in Quesnel and Williams Lake, and in those cities, pine beetle has become a big problem. So this is a great boon to the forestry sector in northern communities such as Fort St. John. You've probably heard in the last month the news that Petronas has threatened to pull out of their LNG plant should the terms that the government issues not be favorable enough. A lot of people ask me, do I still think the plant is going to go through? I still am definitely confident that it will go through. Do I believe we'll make a lot of money if it does? Yes. Do I believe it's the end of the world if it doesn't go through? Well, actually, not so much. And there's 4 main reasons that I've reached these conclusions. Reason number 1: Petronas actually has plenty of skin in the game here. They've actually invested over $8 billion. There's a great article in the Vancouver Sun documenting the investments that they've made in the region to date. So with over $8 billion worth of skin in the game, it's no small amount. Number 2, I believe these are negotiations. Right now, the Canadian government is in the middle of formulating their tax regime, deciding how much they're going to tax these LNG plants. So if these LNG plants or these companies came out and said, you know, it doesn't matter what you want to tax me, I'll be happy with it. They're just not going to say that. Of course, they're going to say that, you know, they want to have the best incentives possible to invest. So it just makes sense that they're negotiating here at this point. Number 3, one thing that you may not remember is that when Petronas came in to Canada and acquired Progress Energy for over $5 billion back in 2012, they made a certain number of commitments to the Canadian government to develop the natural gas industry in Fort St. John. And if they start to pull out of these commitments, you can imagine how that will have an impact on their ability to do business in Canada in the future. And with the natural gas plays in Northeast BC and in Alberta being very, very top-notch plays, that's a big risk for them to pull out of. And number 4, I think it's very easy for people to get caught up on one project or another. What I think it's important to remember is that there's actually 17 proposed LNG plants in Northeast BC right now, and also 2 additional plants proposed in Alberta. Now, if you remember my first piece of news that Northeast BC is running at virtually no unemployment, I think the problem isn't so much what these cities are going to do if these new projects aren't moving forward, but the bigger problem for these cities is going to be, what are they going to do if these projects are announced? And I think we have very good reason still to believe that Petronas will be announcing their project here soon. And we also have some news on Site C Dam here that I'll be covering in just a moment. Another interesting headline that I read this month was about Encana. Encana has sold another piece of land in Alberta. And we've talked a lot about Encana selling off a number of their non-core pieces of land so they can focus on their core pieces of land. What caught my attention on this one was what the headline was. It says, Encana Corp flees further from natural gas with $605 million sale of Clearwater assets to Ember Resources. I think this is a very misleading headline if you don't know much about the natural gas industry. There's a difference between what they call liquids-rich gas, or wet gas as it's otherwise known, and dry gas. So what Encana is doing is they're selling off their dry gas assets and focusing on their liquids-rich gas assets. And what a liquids-rich gas is, or wet gas, is that when they get the natural gas out of the ground, it comes with a number of other liquids. Those liquids being butane, propane, one very important one being condensate. The point is these liquids-rich gas plays are much more valuable than the dry gas. So even though they're saying that Encana's fleeing natural gas, they're not necessarily fleeing natural gas. If you look at the article, he says, we are unlocking additional value from non-core dry gas assets as we focus on liquids-rich growth areas. And the basin underneath Fort St. John and Dawson Creek are both liquids-rich gas areas. So these are still the areas that Encana continues to pour into. We're seeing this in Dawson Creek as we go and do our rentals as well, that a number of Encana employees are coming into town. So fantastic news for investors, especially those in and around Dawson Creek. And last but certainly not least, this month, the federal and provincial governments have both given their environmental approvals for the Site C dam. This is a monstrous leap forward, and it takes us to the final step, which is the provincial government approving the financing for the project. Christy Clark has been on record multiple times stating her support for the Site C dam. So if you were to ask me a week ago what I thought the chances of it were going through, it might have been around 60 or 70%. Now I am incredibly optimistic about this project going through. I think we're getting very close now. It's crunch time for having big announcements such as the Site C dam, Petronas, which I still believe is going through, and a number of other projects. So I believe there's still a window of opportunity for investors to get in and do very well. I am a little bit, most of the time when I've seen windows of opportunity, they usually close a little quicker than even I anticipate. For example, this announcement of the Site C dam, I wasn't expecting that, the environmental approval until October 22nd. So these things have a way of sneaking up on us. So I hope if you are interested in investing in Northeast BC that you get the information necessary to make a decision. There's a couple things you can do, or a couple of events that we're providing to help you get that information. Number one, like I said, we're doing the webinar on Saturday at 10 a.m. Number two, we're also doing our next investor trip up to Northeast BC on November 1st and 2nd. If you have questions on either, please get a hold of me, and I hope we can all make some money in Northeast BC. Thanks again, and I look forward to talking to you next month.